Hi everybody, thanks for tuning into today's video. I've been struggling a little bit to come up with ideas for today's video. We're between model updates, so I can't really do the autumn forecast, the first one, which will come up in a couple of weeks. We haven't got the update from the Japanese model for July, August and September, so can't do that. So I thought I'd have a bit of an eclectic look at different stuff, really. We're going to look at the AMO, the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. We're also going to have a look at how the Enso, the El Nino, is developing in the Pacific, and we'll finish up having a look at solar cycle 24 to see how that is progressing as well. So different mishmash of stuff. Hope you enjoy the video on this Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, depending on when you're looking at it. Before I get on with the video, just mention you have advertise the best video ads. My page is at gasworthies.com. Hit play on the video ad. You'll be supporting gasworthies.com. Thanks very much for doing that. So let's start off with the AMO, the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. Just to quickly say what the AMO is. It's a roughly 30-year cyclical cycle of warming and cooling in the Atlantic Ocean. So from around 1895, 1900, something like that, to around 1926, we have the cold phase of the AMO, which you can see on this graph just here. That's when we had a cold Atlantic Ocean. Generally, of course, we do get some exceptions. We get these various spikes through the period where the Atlantic is warmer briefly for the odd year or two. But overall, you see that on the graph, the cold years are far outnumbering the warm years, and that's going from around 1895 to say 1926. Then from around 1926 to 1963, we're in the warm phase of the AMO, which we go through just here. Again, we do get some colder years, particularly this cluster just here in the late 1940s into the very start of 1950s. It goes a bit colder, but overall you see that the warm years with the Atlantic, the warm temperature anomalies in the Atlantic are far outnumbering the cold years. Just a few appearing again, cold years at the end of the 1950s and into around the start of 1960s. That's just as the prelude really to going into the cold phase, because as we go through 1963 and then going through to 1995, we're in the cold phase of the AMO once again. So there we go, all the years are coming out cold, or most of the years are coming out cold. Again, we do get one or two warmer years mixed in there, but they're very much in the minority. Overall, this is the cold phase of the AMO just here once again. And then since 1995, which is just here, we're actually going through to the warm phase of the AMO once again, and we're in the warm phase of the AMO right now. And if you think that it's going to be roughly a 30 to 35 year cycle, well, assuming we started the warm phase of the AMO in 1995, which is a pretty good assumption, I think. Although there is a bit of a caveat with that, of course, because we had Mount Pinatubo going off in the early 90s, in 1991, and that did have the effect of cooling down the Atlantic through 91, 92, 93 and 94. So whether the warm AMO would have started earlier than 1995, it does have some controversy about it, actually. Perhaps if it hadn't been for Pinatubo going off and cooling down the global temperature for 2 or 3 years, we may have started the warm phase of the AMO a little bit earlier than 1995. Anyway, 1995 is the official year that the AMO started, so we're in that phase. If you assume that we've got another 30 years or so of it to go, then that takes us to around 2025. So we're firmly in the middle, really, of the warm AMO period. But quite interesting what's happening in the Atlantic, because we have actually turned quite cold. We've got quite a cold AMO just at the moment. So in fact, we're in the middle of this warm AMO period. We do see quite a lot of cold water, and we have seen this over the last few months in the Atlantic Ocean, and the Atlantic has actually been coming out pretty cold through many of the months through this year, 2014. I'll show you some lists of years in a moment. Pretty cold in comparison to where we are in the warm AMO. It's not cold compared to if we was in the cold AMO, it wouldn't be that noteworthy, but for where we are in the middle of the warm AMO, quite unusual to have the Atlantic as cold as it is at the moment. Of course, back to this graph, I'll go back to what happened in the late 1940s, around 1947 to 1950. We did get a colder cluster of years there, right in the middle of this otherwise warm period of the AMO. So maybe we go through that again. You can't see the dip in the AMO that we've had this year because this last period finishes in 2013, so that isn't on the graph yet. 2014 isn't on the graph, but when it comes in, it's likely that it will probably be a colder than average AMO year. But as I say, we did get it in the middle of the last warm AMO happening around the end of the 1940s. If we have a look at this graph here, which you can see from NOAA, this is from NOAA. It's not actually a graph, but it's the list of years warm and cold AMO. This is quite interesting, going to this number just here. This is the number that we had in April, minus 0.071. It doesn't sound like a great deal negative. It doesn't sound like a huge negative anomaly, but actually for last year we had a year colder than this, or a month colder than this, in terms of the AMO. Was way back in 2002. This year just here, or this month I should say just here, June 2002, which came out at minus 0.097. So in April the AMO was at its coldest, or at its most negative, since 2002. By the way, you can see the change to the warm AMO just here. Here's 1994, the last time pretty much, let's see how straight my line can go, pretty much every month in 1994 comes out negative. So that's the last sort of cold year of the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. As I say, a bit of controversy about that because we've got Pinatubo affecting the global temperature, so it's possible that 1994 wouldn't have been as cold as that in the Atlantic if it hadn't been Pinatubo. Anyway, that's the last year that was fully negative. We go through to 1995 and we start off, the first couple of months are negative and then we go positive, and the rest of the months through 1995 are positive in terms of the AMO. So yeah, that's definitely the year where things change, things flip from the cold AMO into the warm AMO. I just want to show you something else that's quite interesting. The last time we was in the warm phase, I should say, of the AMO, as I explained at the beginning with the graph, was from 1926. I'll just highlight here, going right the way down to 1963, and that's interesting because the year that flips from the warm AMO to the cold AMO, 1963, also coincides with that very, very cold winter of 62-63. Now, what's quite interesting about the AMO is that I'll just bring the camera back briefly. What's quite interesting about the AMO, Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, is that you would think the colder years for the AMO would coincide with colder winters. That isn't necessarily or particularly the case, actually. It's the warm AMO that's interesting for colder winters. The period from, well, it didn't go cold in terms of the winters at the start of the warm AMO in 1926. We had quite warm winters through the 1930s, but really from 1940s, 1950s into the start of 1960s, that was a period where it had some very interestingly cold winters. And then we go into the cold AMO after 1963, and generally the winters warm up because it took a long time. There was a number of cold winters throughout the 60s, but as we get through to 1970s and then into the 1980s, and of course into the 1990s, we get lots of mild winters coming along, coinciding, interestingly, with that cold period of the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. We've gone back into the warm AMO since 1995, and it's taken a long time, probably because of the PDO. I think the Pacific decadal oscillation, which I won't go into in detail in this video, but I think the PDO probably is more important actually than the AMO, because it's taken a long time, but eventually as the PDO has gone cold, which happened in around 2007, that's when we started to see those cold winters coming through that we've had quite a lot of recently, although we didn't have one in 2014. So what you need, I think, for cold winters for us in terms of the AMO is to have the AMO warm, but also just as important perhaps is to have the PDO cold. You have to have that combination. Of course, these cycles are all the while shifting and changing, so we are in the cold PDO, although it's warm this year. We are in the warm AMO, although it's quite cold this year, interestingly. But this year is very unusual compared to where we are in the cycles. And overall, I would expect the next 10 years or so to still be in this, 10-15 years perhaps or so, to still be in this period of the warm AMO, the cold PDO, and thus we would expect more cold winters coming up over the next decade or two. I hope that made it interesting anyway. It's a little bit to think about the AMO and the PDO. And it's interesting how this year, 2014, we're deviating with the AMO compared to the warm AMO that we are in. Now let's go back and have a look and see how the Enso is doing. So we'll go back to this chart, and of course we've got the El Nino coming on in the equatorial Pacific, and we can see on the very latest sea surface temperature anomaly from NOAA, this was on the 12th of June, on Thursday. We can see that, yeah, we are warming along the dateline, along the equatorial Pacific, I should say, not the dateline. The dateline goes north to south, the equator goes east to west, or west to east, depending on your point of view. Anyway, we're warming along the equatorial Pacific, so El Nino is coming on. Now, a couple of months ago, a month ago or so, there was a lot of talk about a super sort of mega El Nino event. I think that's pretty unlikely, actually. I don't think we're going to get a super Nino this year, and I'll show you the reason why. This is the SOI index, the Southern Oscillation Index. It's basically, I won't go into it in too much detail, but the Southern Oscillation Index is basically a reflection of the atmosphere in the Southern Oceans. It's a little bit like the North Atlantic Oscillation in a way. It's not driving anything. It's an index that sort of reflects the setup in the Southern Oceans, particularly in the Pacific. And when the SOI is positive, it's telling us that we're in a La Nina phase. When the SOI is negative, it's telling us that we're in an El Nino phase. Now, what's happening this year is that, despite the fact the El Nino is coming on, the SOI is staying stubbornly in positive territory. So the atmosphere is still reflecting sort of a La Nina setup, while the Enso, the El Nino, is actually developing. So the atmosphere and the oceans are not coupling up just at the moment. Now, we did have this plunge in the SOI that happened either, I think it was March or April. It had a big plunge then, and that's really when we had all the talk of the Super Nino coming on. There's a lot of speculation that this is going to be a big mega event, but since then we've sort of swung back actually into positive territory with the SOI. So again, when we're negative, it's telling us that the atmosphere is reflecting the El Nino. So for instance, this period just here, 2002 to 2003, this is the El Nino of 2002-2003, and the SOI was reflecting what was going on there in terms of the El Nino developing. The SOI, the atmosphere, in other words, was reflecting the El Nino. Now, let's go on, have a look at 2007, 2006, 2007, which is another period where we get the El Nino coming on, 2006, 2007, and the SOI again goes negative through that period. So again, we're reflecting what is going on in terms of the El Nino developing in the atmosphere. But 2009, 2010 was the last time we had an El Nino, and again we do get the SOI going negative there. So I think we can expect to have the SOI going negative. It will go negative as this El Nino develops, but because it's taking a long time to sort of develop, as it did in 2009 actually, and as it did to a lesser extent through the El Nino of 2006-2007, because it's taking its time for the atmosphere to reflect the El Nino in terms of the Southern Oscillation Index. I think that's the reason we're going to struggle to get a mega El Nino this year. Nevertheless, I would expect the SOI to start going negative any time. But if you want to look at what a mega El Nino looks like, this is the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, from 97-98. That was the mega El Nino, and just look how the SOI plunged through 1997. We start here in positive territory in January and February, but the plunge really takes place from February to March, going negative. Then April, May, June, we fall off the cliff in terms of the SOI. We don't come back then. We stay very negative throughout the rest of 1997, and we don't start to come back until we get into the spring of 98, when we push up positive, and that's as the La Nina develops through the course of 1998. But we haven't seen anything like this so far in terms of the SOI this year. So I think that's what it looks like when we do have a mega El Nino going on, and the atmosphere reflects that mega El Nino. We haven't had that this year, so consequently I think it probably is quite unlikely that we're going to have a mega El Nino, and that's where the models are trending. This is the forecast from the CFS version 2. It's indicating a sort of moderate El Nino event, to be honest. This is the latest update, and it takes us up to around +1 to +1.5, something like that, in that sort of ballpark just there. It's a moderate El Nino. It is an El Nino event, don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying it. We are going to have an El Nino this year, but it's sort of a moderate El Nino, not particularly unusual. Certainly nothing on a par with 97, 98, which would be up here around this area if we was going to get that. Also, looks quite likely that we're going to have a Madiki El Nino, which is something that's a little bit different. 97-98 had a proper El Nino, which is but it was warm from the coast of Peru. The sea surface temperature anomalies, quickly go back, were warm from the coast of Peru through to Indonesia. All parts were very, very warm. Probably the warmest was actually around this region just here off the coast of Peru. But as I say, I think we're going to see more of a Madiki El Nino this year, which means that coastal strip around Peru is cooler. So this is the forecast from the CFS model for regions 1 and 2, which is off the coast of Peru, and we see we actually dip away in terms of those temperature anomalies through this year. This is where we are right now in June. We're dipping away through the rest of the year if the forecast is right. By the end of the year, by the time we get through to October and November, we're actually just around average in terms of the sea surface temperature anomalies. At the same time, it is warming through regions 3.4, and regions 3.4 are this area here in the middle of the equatorial Pacific, and I can show you this on the actual sea surface temperature anomaly forecast. This is for the forecast from the CFS model for October this year, and it's showing that off the coast of Peru, regions 1.2, we're near normal, so we're cooler there, and then in the middle of the Pacific, just in this region here, this is the 3.4 region, we're warmer. That's a Madiki El Nino. It's different to a standard normal El Nino, and it's colder. It is colder for the United States in particular. So with the Madiki El Nino likely, I think we are once again probably looking at another cold winter for North America. I don't want to go too overboard about this just yet, but I do think much of North America is in for a colder time of it again in the coming winter of 2014-2015. Quite how that plays out for us in the United Kingdom and for Europe, it's hard to say. The PDO is still forecast to stay warm up to the end of the year. That's this area just here. So with the PDO warm, the AMO still quite cold actually. It may be sort of goes with that idea that we have through the 1970s, 1980s and 1990s, and maybe it favours a milder winter for us actually. But we'll have to wait and see. By the time we get through to winter, it could well be that the PDO will be cooling down and the reason that's probably quite likely actually for the PDO to be cooling off by the time you get through to the end of the year is that it'll be preceding the switch to La Nina that's very likely to occur next year as this El Nino dies away at the start of next year. It's very likely that we'll move into La Nina, and we could cool the PDO down in advance of that. So it's uncertain what all this means for us in British Isles and in Europe, but for America, I think with a Medici El Nino, not a mega El Nino as we had in 97, 98, but with a Medici El Nino, we are quite likely to have a colder winter coming through for North America. Let's just have a look at the solar cycles. This is the view of the solar disk on our side of the disk. Today solar activity is low. I have got some sunspots of course, but it's low in terms of the solar activity today. We're dipping down from the solar maximum that we went into in February. We did reach solar max I think for this solar cycle just there at the start of 2014. Now we're dipping away and we're likely to carry on dropping I think through well, probably through to solar minimum, but it won't be linear. We'll still get some spikes up and down, but overall I think we have reached the maximum or past the maximum for solar cycle 24, and it'll be generally downhill all the way. This chart here really does put things into context for solar cycle 24 compared to the last two. This goes back to the middle of the 1980s. This is solar cycle 25 just here. Incredibly active cycle, reached its peak around 1990. This is solar cycle 23, which reached its peak around the year 2000. That is less of a cycle than cycle 22, but it's still a big cycle. And then we go down to cycle 24, which is the one we're currently in, much weaker than those solar previous two solar cycles. And it's interesting that the 3 times, just very quick to talk about this, the 3 times that we've had solar minimum up through these solar cycles, which is around 1985, 1986, just here, and again around middle of the 1990s, 1995, 1996, just here, and again around 2008, 2009, 2010, just here. The 3 times we've had solar minimums have coincided with colder winters, but of course with this solar cycle, because it's been so weak, even as we've gone up to solar maximum, we've still managed to pull off some colder winters. We didn't do it last winter, 2014, but the winter before that, 2012, 2013, was colder, and as I say, the reason we've managed to pull that off because it's much less of the solar cycle, it's much weaker solar cycle, so even though it's been at solar maximum, because it's much weaker, we've still managed to pull off cold winters. But it's very interesting about the 3 times we've had solar minimums with these 3 solar cycles, we have had an instance or an increased instance of cold and average winters. I'm a big believer that when solar activity is weak, particularly around solar minimum of course, when solar activity is weak, it coincides, reasons aren't understood, I explained this before in other videos, it coincides with an increased risk of blocking in the northern latitudes, and particularly around Europe, northern Eurasia. And that just goes shown again, 1995, 1996, 1995, 1996, 2008, 2009, 2010. You can see the evidence for yourself. It is very interesting. Okay, I've gone on far too long. Hope I haven't bored you too much with this video. Hope you found it interesting. I didn't know what I was going to talk about actually today, so it's quite amazing when I've gone on so long when I had no idea what today's video was going to be about. But I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, lots of food for thought and ideas to chew on in the video. Thanks for watching. We'll probably have a look at the Japanese model next week for July, August and September. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.